WeInfuse Podcast, episode number 28. Welcome to the WeInfuse Podcast. My name is Dylan McCabe, and in every episode, we give you a behind-the-scenes look at the infusion center landscape, and we interview industry experts so that you can have tips, tools, and a roadmap to grow your infusion practice the best way possible. And in this episode, I'm really excited because we interview Woody Baum. He's the founder and CEO of OI Infusion, based out of New Hampshire. They're in over 25 groups across the nation managing their infusion practices. He has over 50 employees, and he has a really unique story of going from being in the mergers and acquisition space, doing debt and equity raises for a very large company, and then moving from that to launching an infusion center management company. You're going to hear that story and the key takeaways from it. And then this episode, let's jump right into it. All right. As I mentioned, we have a special guest, Woody Baum, on the show today. He's the founder and CEO of OI Infusion. So Woody, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Dylan.
Heck yeah, I'm glad we could pull this off. And in the midst of, the recording this podcast, in the midst of all the COVID-19 stuff, everything is still rocking and rolling with infusion centers. Life has to keep going. So I'm really excited to hear your story. And before we dive into all the questions I want to ask, just give our listeners kind of your background, who you are, and how OI Infusion started.
Yeah, so again, my name's Woody Baum, the founder and CEO of OI Infusion. I have a background in corporate finance primarily. I worked at mergers and acquisitions at Goldman Sachs and Citi and doing debt and equity raises as well. Prior to founding the company, I had been looking for healthcare companies to acquire and operate. We knew that payers were forcing a lot of services out of the outpatient setting into lower cost settings, and thought that was a really interesting trend that we wanted to be able to capitalize on. Was looking for opportunities in that sort of fit that general thesis when my now business partner reached out to me, Gareth Dickens, and said, Woody, there's these companies in Texas that are doing infusion center management. They're partnering with physicians to open in-office infusion centers and take that off of the physician's plate and help lower healthcare costs, provide a better patient experience. And they've been successful in Texas, but we don't really have anything like that in the Northeast. And when he presented that as an idea, I did my diligence on it, and I thought it was really compelling, both from a sort of a value standpoint in terms of who benefits from in-office infusion center management. I didn't know much about infusions, but I could really understand the value to physicians of opening an in-office infusion center and outsourcing that service. And I could understand the benefits to patients, and the benefits to payers was very clear. So that was really compelling. And as I did more diligence, I thought that there was a real opportunity, both geographic, because there wasn't a big presence in the Northeast with infusion center management companies, but just in general, we thought there was a gap in what could be provided versus what the market was giving to independent physicians. So, sort of armed with that knowledge, went ahead with my partner, raised some money, and off to the races. He had a background with urgent care, and I hired two of his employees to help me get the business off the ground. He became my first client, and my job was to build a business out of it. So we started January 2018. Since then, we've grown to over 25 in-office infusion centers throughout the Northeast and Midwest. We're now in the Southeast as of a couple weeks ago, and have over 50 employees. It's been a ride, to say the least.
Wow, that's quite an opening to your story. I don't to my knowledge, unless I'm just experiencing a lot of inefficiency in my brain due to the arrival of a newborn, I don't think we've interviewed anybody that started an infusion center management company. We've interviewed a few guys that have started infusion centers, but not infusion center management companies. And I think it's really interesting that you come from a background where you were constantly analyzing mergers, acquisitions, doing debt and equity raises, constantly looking through spreadsheets to see how viable something is and looking at the market and just looking at all the different factors for viability there. And you're really the perfect guy to determine whether or not this is a business you can launch into. And you had your friend who you partnered with who had a background in urgent care. So the two of you guys teamed up. And I mean, gosh, you started in January of 2018. I would call that success for sure, and some pretty rapid growth now that you're in 25 sites.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, we had a business plan. We're ahead of that plan. It's the growth is, it's definitely faster than we thought it would be. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that there's a need out there, that infusions are really complicated. Independent physicians often need help with it, and we offer a solution that helps meet their needs. So, when you're solving a real problem, you're gonna grow. You're gonna see adoption. So, I'll say it was expected but unexpected. Everything we've come across.
Well, get ready for the contact on LinkedIn, because I think anybody thinking, any guys that are kind of like you were thinking about, okay, we may partner up and start an infusion center, they're going to probably want to talk to you. But looking back, what was one of the things that, I mean, obviously, again, this is right in your wheelhouse, analyzing a business model and determining all the factors it takes to start a business. But what were the things that really stood out to you that you wish you had done, that you maybe missed or maybe didn't account for early in the early planning stages?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs, ignorance is bliss sometimes. You want a solid business plan, but sometimes if you know too much, it can get overwhelming and actually dissuade you. And I did not know how sort of complicated infusion centers would be. Sort of on paper, it seemed like a fairly straightforward business, and an office model would seem straightforward. It's incredibly complicated. Incredibly complicated. And that's why, there's really, besides us, there's probably only 3 other infusion center management companies out there. They're really tough to start. They're tough to grow. They're tough to scale. We've powered through some of those issues, but I think being ignorant to, or sort of unaware of some of the challenges, worked in our favor, because, once you're in it, you've got to survive. I mean, you arrive on shore and you burn the boats, and you've got no other option but to push forward. But infusions are challenging. It's different. Even people in healthcare don't understand how complicated it can be. We've had to learn the hard way at times on some of the challenges.
So share one of those stories about one of the most challenging situations you've had to deal with running an infusion center. I mean, was it staff? Was it side effects of a drug being administered to a patient? Was it all the moving parts of the business model? I mean, share a specific instance where you're like, holy cow, this is, I didn't see this coming.
I think there's a lot that I can point to. One story that stands out, and it's a fairly unremarkable story, but we had, we received a referral for an Ocrevus infusion. So it was a $32,000 infusion. And we did everything perfect. We did the benefits investigation. We got the prior authorization. I mean, we crossed our I's and dotted our T's. And I know I got that backwards, but we did everything right. And then we got denied. We submitted the claim, we got denied. We appealed, we got denied. I mean, we did everything perfect. It met medical necessity. And it actually turned out the patient had an insurance plan that she wasn't aware of. And it's just, we had to bite the bullet on that. We had to eat the cost of a really expensive drug. And it was really frustrating to think, man, like, we did everything right. Like, we couldn't have done anything differently. And we still had to write this off. And then, at the same time, I thought, well, for us as a business, that's kind of the point. It's that, physicians can do everything right. And it doesn't mean you're going to get paid. Right. And these are such expensive drugs that the cost of mistakes is so high. And that's what allows us to survive as a business. But it was both sort of bad in the sense of, it was, frustrating that we had to write this down, but at the same time, it was good that, hey, there's a real problem we solved. This is why a lot of physicians don't infuse when they could, because of these challenges, and we can help them with this. We have deep enough pockets to weather some of these storms, and we're relentless. And so if we do have to write something off, we're not stopping. I mean, we're not going to just get a denial and stop there. We have the bandwidth and the stubbornness to pursue that claim. And often we do get paid, but it happens, right? And the consequences to mistakes in this industry are really high.
So let me piggyback off that, because I met with a lot of physicians in the Northeast, especially in New York. As I was calling on certain offices that did infuse, I ran across so many that did not. And when I asked the physicians, do you do any in-office infusions? They were like, oh, no, absolutely not. I don't want to run into financial problems and this and that and the other. And they hear one story of something that went wrong and it makes them just run the other way. So if I'm a physician, because we do have a lot of physicians listening to this podcast, if I'm a physician and I've toyed with the idea of starting an infusion practice, what is your sales pitch essentially to me as a physician, as an infusion center management company? I mean, what do you guys come in and say, and what makes your offering so compelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's just having an honest conversation with that physician about what are his or her strengths, and having, if they have the self-awareness to recognize whether their office can or cannot do this service. And the core competency of a physician office is not infusion therapy. That's not to say they can't do it, right? Plenty of independent physicians infuse independently and infuse successfully. But I tell that story of that one Ocrevus denial and say, hey, like, you need to be prepared for these events. You might get denied, or maybe it takes 6 to 9 months to get paid on that claim, but you still paid for the drug, right? The money is spent already. You spent $30,000 to maybe make $600 9 months from now. It's not. Is that really the best use of your time? Do you have $50,000 to $100,000 set aside in the event that some of these claims get denied, and you have to fight them, and it takes 6 months to get paid? Or keep doing your thing as a physician, keep doing the office visits, keep treating patients. Let us handle the headache. Especially starting up. Starting up is really challenging. In a couple of years down the line, if you're unhappy or you think you could do it better on your own, feel free. But the beginning is one of the more challenging times, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and they can be really expensive. And if we can help a physician not have to learn those lessons, it just makes a lot of sense for them. So, but it takes some self-aware. It takes an understanding of that physician's strengths and weaknesses, and the ability to say, hey, we're good at this. We may not be that great at this, or hey, we can probably figure this out, but do we really want to potentially be wrong on that? So, it's just one less thing for the physician to worry about.
And so let's say I say to you, okay, Woody, you guys have been in business 2 years. You've got over 50 employees. You're in 25 sites around the U.S. I checked out your website. You work with rheumatologists. I'm a rheumatologist. You also work with other specialties. But what's the process? You've got my interest. What's the next step?
We go over your patient volume, your census, what patients are in infusibles, what your payer mix. We'll put together a pro forma to see if it makes sense from a financial standpoint. And if that's the case, we've got a service agreement they sign, and then we're up and running in 6 weeks from the time they sign an agreement. So 6 weeks from the time they sign, there's patients in the chair infusing, and and we know how busy practice staff is. Without us, it wouldn't take 6 weeks. It might take 6-9 months. I mean, just how sort of overworked and understaffed a lot of these offices are. So the ability to get that up and running is interesting. We work. I'm in New York City right now. We're based in New Hampshire, but I'm in New York right now because we had to set up an infusion center that the introduction from came from WeInfuse, from a rheumatologist who was busy setting up his practice. Which is an undertaking in and of itself. Brand young, new physician, new independent practice, wanted an infusion center, didn't quite have the bandwidth to do it on his own. And we went live with our first patient, 2 days ago in the midst of a pandemic. So I was here to put the finishing touches on it. There's some travel restrictions in our company, and I was the only one that could make it down. But that ability to sort of navigate through really challenging. Through a health crisis is it sort of tells us this is why we're here. We can make this happen, get these patients treated, when if they were on their own, it would be a monumental effort to make it happen. Whereas since it's all we do, we can get it done.
Yeah, no, I think it's an awesome offering. And so let's address the elephant in the room that I hear a lot of. The biggest reason physicians, or the biggest challenge a lot of physicians see to getting going, is payer contracting. The physician may say, listen, this sounds great. I get it. You're going to take the risk. And I've looked at, judging by your website, it looks like you even provide nursing staff and revenue cycle management and all these things. So I'm not going to have to add a lot of, things to my headspace. But what about payer contracting? Do you guys help with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we do, and we've been successful with a lot of our clients in improving or getting elevated rates for infusions. A lot of physicians, when they sign their their payer contracts, there's infusion codes in those contracts, even when they're not infusing. And it's one of those things that they don't notice when they're doing the negotiation. When it's time to infuse, they realize, oh gosh, like I'm getting, it's less than Medicare. It doesn't really make any sense. So you've got to revisit that, and we do that, and have been able to be successful. In our concentration and in the Northeast especially has allowed us to push and get elevated rates for the infusion centers. But it also, it really also depends on the payer. I mean, some payers are more cooperative than others. Some payers see the value in in-office infusions. Others don't. So, more often than not, we're successful. But it's one of the things we look at when we begin a relationship.
Well, I like how you mentioned in the beginning, it's really kind of an analysis of a physician's strengths and weaknesses. Some people are really just business minded, or they've had training, gotten an MBA degree, or whatever it might be. And some people just are not, and they're not really detail oriented, and they don't. That's what ends up biting them in the end, because they're so focused on their patients and they're not minding their business. I mean, I just heard a story last week of a friend that had a small business that the person he had doing the bookkeeping was stealing money for about a year before they found out. But he had given that over to the bookkeeper, and wasn't, because that wasn't a strength of his, and unfortunately didn't really do enough vetting on the bookkeeper. But I like what you guys are offering, because you're coming in saying, look, if this is not a core competency, we can come in, we will take all the risk, but we're gonna partner with you in a sense to grow your practice and grow your business. We're going to assess the risk. We're going to assess the profitability. And especially with your background in particular, Woody, I would think that you guys would really be able to ease a lot of tension on the financial end and really come in and help physicians grow another revenue stream.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll push back on one of your points, Dylan. Some of our best clients are very sophisticated operators. That they run a really tight ship. They are well-run practices, but they're also smart enough to know this isn't what we're good at. This isn't what we're good at. So they great at the office operations, great at the practice billing, but they know enough to know what they're not good at, and so they don't even want to enter that arena. So it's not just our clients aren't just a combination of. There's a combination of, I don't want to say smaller single provider practices, but we also have some very sophisticated clients who know that, hey, this is dangerous. It's the people in the middle who don't quite know enough to know what they don't know that really run a risk of getting burned here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even for those more sophisticated practices, I'm sure there's a lot of instances where they say, we've grown very large. We've even got multiple sites, but this is not something we just have the bandwidth right now. And we know that you guys are experts in this space. So we want you to come in and help us grow this thing.
Absolutely. In some of those large sophisticated sites, they've got, aggressive growth plans that they need to focus on. And as an entrepreneur and a CEO, one of the things that I stress and I stress to my team is the idea of focus. Is you can't do everything well. Focus on a couple of things, do it really well, and that's it. So for a multi-location gastroenterology practice that's trying to enter into new markets, that's their focus, and diverting time and attention away from that to what could be material, but also smaller ancillary revenue source like infusion might not be worth the time. For them, it might be more important to focus on their growth and expansion strategies than this ancillary service opportunity. So, what we do gives those sophisticated operators the time and bandwidth to focus on more important initiatives.
That's so good. So, we talked about one of the biggest challenges you faced. What about a success story? Can you share a real story of when you guys have partnered with a physician practice, and it's just been a great case study of what happens when OI Infusion comes in and helps a provider add this to their offering?
Yeah. So I would say almost all of our clients are good success stories. One that comes to mind, and I'm going to meet with the physician right now, is a rheumatology group in Eastern Long Island. He had spent years infusing in the office, but doing only specialty, referring out the Medicare patients, only doing specialty pharmacy in the office, really as a service to his patients. And the complexity of that just overwhelmed the practice. And he was doing all this work, getting none of the revenue because it was specialty and not buy and bill. And it was taking a toll on the practice. And we signed an agreement with them about a year ago. We're able to get their Medicare patients back in, switch the patients from specialty to buy and bill, and have been able to grow the infusion center by over 2.5 times since the time we started. So it's become a really important revenue source for the practice. And at the same time, his practice workload decreased significantly, because they were probably spending 40% of the practice efforts on this infusion center. And now they're focusing it on the actual practice, and they're able to hire new providers, another MP, and really increase their patient population. So the workload went down, the practice revenue went up, the patients are happy. We're able to treat patients that we weren't otherwise able to treat, the Medicare patients that were getting referred out. So our client roster is filled with success stories like that, but that's a pretty good example.
So what would you say is one of the keys to your success in this? Because you guys are obviously successful. You're growing, you're adding numbers, you've got lots of success stories. What's one of the keys? I mean, with you, especially as the founder and CEO, what would you say? Here's the biggest thing. Here's the best advice I have for anybody thinking about doing this. And this is what's made us successful as we've managed infusion practices.
Yeah. So without a doubt, the most important thing you could do is hire amazing people. And I work with the most amazing people in the industry. Some of the people that helped us start the business, have had a big impact in the industry, helped write the minimum, Katie Morgan helped write the minimum standards of care. I mean, that's who I'm starting off with, right? So off the bat, I'm starting with a huge advantage. I've hired some really incredible business development staff, Ashley Knapp, Berkeley Taylor Allen, who's our clinical director now, Angela Johnson, Matt Cheever. Just the people that I work with are top notch. And I hire amazing people. We set some general, direction, and then I get out of their way, and then amazing things happen. So I think as a leader, that's just, your biggest focus should be on hiring great people. And if you spend 50% of your time doing that, 50% of your day-to-day hiring great people, you will be successful.
That's so good. I know I love reading leadership books, especially those by John Maxwell, and that's one of the points that he hammers away at again and again, is just surrounding yourself by your dream team and making sure you hire people that are just made to excel in those areas that you hire them for. And then you can spend your time kind of just coaching and encouraging them, but they'll do way better than you ever could in that role. And it sounds like you've done that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't do 90%. I mean, I had to set up an infusion center this, 2 days ago. I physically go in. I was the only one able to travel. And I'm thinking, gosh, our team is doing this, more than once a month right now, just audit like clockwork automatically. This is so hard. How do they do it? Well, they're incredible. I mean, they're just really incredible people. I couldn't, aside from the nursing, which is a totally another thing, and we can get into that in a second, but I couldn't do most of the functions in my business. I mean, my team is just incredible at what they do, and they're really passionate, really engaged, and I just try to remove obstacles from them, and we get amazing results because of that.
That's so good. And then what about, how do you kind of navigate using the tools that you use? Because we all know that healthcare is just full of software solutions and tools and moving parts and phone calls and notes and EMRs and all this stuff. I mean, what's a resource that you could recommend that's really helpful to your physicians and to your infusion centers?
Yeah, we're on the WeInfuse podcast, and WeInfuse is our we use WeInfuse for our EHR. I think we are one of the first sort of enterprise clients of WeInfuse, and it's been a really invaluable part of our growth. It's just the intuitiveness of it, the straightforwardness of the software just makes it really easy to use. And in a growing company, when you're adding a lot of employees, that's really important. And our business, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the nurses. The nurses are the lifeblood of what we do, and having a solution that works for our nurses is really the most important thing for us, or one of the most important things. And our nurses love working with WeInfuse because of how intuitive it is, how easy it is to use. And we're growing so fast. We're adding nurses quickly, ramping them up, and getting them infusing in an autonomous nature. And they can pick up on everything so quickly within the software that it just makes scaling a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, because one of the questions I want to start asking people who are on our show is, how has WeInfuse impacted your practice? And with you guys with the nursing, that's feedback we get a lot, is that, of course, anybody's hesitant to change at first, but a lot of nurses, once they get on the platform, it actually speeds up their charting and makes their charting easier, faster, and more detailed than before. And so a lot of times we hear stories that we get a lot of thank you emails we get is, yes, it's from people like you, the CEO and founder, but a lot of emails we get once people get on the platform is from the nurses saying, wow, thank you so much. This has saved a lot of double work. This has saved me a lot of time. And we get a lot of feedback like that. So I'm glad you highlighted that. So moving on from all that, so you guys you went from ideation to launching a management company to now where you're at the time of the recording of this podcast, in over 25 centers, over 50 employees. What would you say is the best advice you could give to physicians thinking about starting an infusion practice?
I would think really I think every physician that has the patient volume to justify an infusion center should. The clinical benefits are there. It's so good for the patient. The compliance, the treatment compliance, the relationship that you develop with the patient by infusing in the office. There's really no reason not to if you have the patients. So once you sort of establish that, I would think really carefully about the capabilities that you have as a staff, the bandwidth that you have to develop this service line, and the financial resources that you have to weather any mistakes or issues. If the answer to those questions is no, I would highly recommend OI or a management company, because it just makes the process go much faster, much smoother. And as an entrepreneur, I always say, there's no credit for being original. If someone else has a good idea and I can use it for the business, I will. There's no credit you don't get credit for figuring out how to manage an infusion center independently. If I can just work with another person or another group to do it for me easier and faster, well, then that's great. I can go, it just makes me sleep better at night. So, I believe in what we offer as a service. We have over 25 other groups that do as well, and that's why they work with us. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the patients and the benefits to the patients of in-office infusions. There's no reason to not do it if you have the patient volume.
That's so good. And then let me ask from another angle, what's the best advice you have for physicians who are doing infusions, but just you having your expertise and coming on the outside looking in? What's something that you see time and time again that people need to take note of or be aware of in their current infusion practices?
Yeah, I mean, if you're already infusing, I mean, it's just you have to stay on top of these payers and the policies they're putting out. I mean, it just gets more and more complex every year with what they're requiring. The medical policies, we have biosimilar policies coming out, which can interrupt patient care or interrupt your ability to get reimbursed. So, staying abreast of those changes is what I would really focus on. And then as new drugs and new therapies are approved, looking at those and thinking of the appropriateness of those for your patients as well.
That's so good. Well, Woody, I mean, it's great to have you on the show. We could talk about this for hours, but just trying to keep it to a consumable time around 35 minutes. This has been great. I mean, you clearly know your stuff. You guys are growing and helping people, and I'm sure there's going to be some interest. So, what's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you or to find you if they want to know more?
You can go on our website, oi-infusion.com, fill out a form. You can email me at wbaum@oi-infusion.com. Just reach out. And Dylan, can I just tell a quick story? Because I before we leave, because this happened yesterday and it's been really touching. But one of the best parts about my day, and I think a lot of sort of people listening to this would agree is the ability to work with the nurses and the clinicians that we do. And I said earlier, the nurses are our lifeblood. But yesterday we had a patient go have a severe anaphylactic reaction and went into cardiac arrest. And two of our nurses who were there were able to perform CPR and resuscitate him. And they got him stable. They got him to the ER, where he was able to survive from this heart attack. And as a result of those nurses, a father goes home to his daughter, a mother has a son, a wife, has a husband. And it just working with these nurses is such a blessing. It's such a privilege. They are true heroes, what they do day in and day out. And that's, it's just so gratifying. And I just had to give a plug to the nurses on our team, Catherine Clark and Kristen Billings and Berkeley and Laundra and all of them, because what they do is so incredible. And it's just such a blessing to be able to work with people like that. And then people in the infusion industry, like working with individuals like that is really rewarding. So I had to drop that in there before we go.
Man, that is awesome. And that's just, unfortunately, another one of those things of having an infusion practice. You hate to think that could happen, but gosh, it did. But thankfully, going back to your initial point about the best advice is just having great people. And you had some amazing nurses right there, and they jumped in to save the day. And like you said, somebody gets to see their dad again. I mean, that's just priceless. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that story.
No, it's been a blessing. I mean, it's really an incredible ride, and we love what we do. We care deeply about the patients, our nurses, and everything, and our clients. So, if anyone wants to reach out, if they have any questions about starting an infusion center, or we can be helpful in any way, just reach out to me, and we'll set up some time to chat.
That's so great. Well, Woody, you've clearly, you guys have the business acumen, and you also have the passion. I mean, it comes across. And for those of you listening, I will put the link to the website in the notes of the show. In addition, you can connect with Woody on LinkedIn, but you'll have that information available in the notes of the podcast as well. So, Woody, thank you so much. This is Woody from OI Infusion, founder and CEO, just giving some great insights on operating infusion centers. So, Woody, thank you for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, everyone at WeInfuse, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
All right. What great tips from Woody. I love his background. I mean, it's just really hard to argue with somebody who has a background in mergers and acquisitions and debt and equity raises with Fortune 100 companies like he worked for, to go in and analyze the infusion practice business model and then partnering up with somebody who had clinical experience. I love his unique take on that, and what a great guy to start an infusion center management company. Because you can know when you work with OI Infusion that they are going to dot every I and cross every T and really look at it, yes, from a clinical perspective, because that's what they're passionate about. But gosh, to make sure you have the business piece of it all lined out, it's just great takeaways. I love what he said about his team, the people he works with, and that that heartwarming story of this patient who was literally, his life was saved by those nurses who were on the scene, knew what to do, and And a daughter has her dad back, a wife has her husband back. It's just an amazing story. And of course, I love what he said about, what's the key resource that they use. They use the WeInfuse platform to manage the entire workflow, from the managing prior auths and all of the insurance process ahead of time, and then going into scheduling, having a chair, and optimizing that scheduling with a chair-based scheduling system, and then the nurses charting, and then all of that information flows over into a really powerful super bill that can be sent to the biller. And I just love that this company, OI Infusion, that's managing these infusion practices, WeInfuse is the tool they use. So if you want to learn more, definitely head over to our website at WeInfuse.com. You can see blog posts that we've written that are actually excellent resources for those of you that want to, sharpen your skills, sharpen your knowledge in the infusion center. And also, if you want to learn more about how WeInfuse can simplify your workflow and save you time and money, just schedule a discovery call with one of our account executives today, and they can shed some light on how much WeInfuse can simplify your workflow. So guys, thanks again for joining us in the WeInfuse podcast. If this has been helpful, please rate and review on iTunes. It helps us get the word out. My name is Dylan McCabe with the WeInfuse podcast, and I will catch you in the next episode.